started. People will make their way in as the next few minutes. Okay. And so first, we're mostly going over a lot of updates. We've been doing a lot of work as an organization with a lot of new projects. Definitely this whole transition to remote working has really just shone a light on the need for connection to the internet, to go to work, school, and to conduct your daily life. So a lot of organizations in the city have been really interested, and we've been working with them, and we'll give a few more updates from Scott and Rob in a few minutes. But first, Akash is going to present on, he's a newer volunteer and has been doing a lot of work with our finances and helping us become, a sustainable organization that people can depend on for their internet over the long term. So Akash, are you able to share your screen, or do you need me to add you as
I can share it, I think. I'll share it in a second. It's so weird to see yourself in this delayed little box. But
all of a sudden that came up twice, and I was like, oh, okay. This is not what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, but anyway, a few of you have seen me on Slack. I've been involved with NYC Mesh for about 6 or so months now, but mostly working with Scott. And in my day job, I work with a lot of technology startups and helping them grow. And just in talking with Scott and in trying to figure out where I could be the most helpful for NYC Mesh, it felt like there was a lot we could do in terms of kind of professionalizing our finances with the ultimate goal of positioning ourselves better for applying for larger grants and just generally further growth as an organization. And the timing felt really great since we are spinning out of ISOC into our own entity. So there's kind of a blank slate we can work with there. So that's a bit about me and where I fit into the picture. And like Jillian mentioned, I just want to give a quick update on some of the things going on in the world of NYC Mesh and finance. The first one is related to some old news, in that we have created a separate legal entity, NYC Mesh Inc. And Scott has been leading the charge on applying for 501c3 status for that. And the main benefit there is, of course, it lets us accept donations tax-free and lets the donor deduct those donations. But let me share my screen now. And this is a slide I made up in 10 minutes, so prepare for something really impressive. Even though we're still applying for 501c3 status, we can still accept donations today and have them become retroactively deductible. And first of all, can you guys see my screen? Okay.
Yeah.
And there has been some discussion. Let's see, hold on. Sorry, something popped up on my screen here.
Yeah, it's always less intuitive.
Yes. Okay, yeah, so there's been some discussion on Slack, mostly by me, around transitioning over a portion of our donations to that new entity today, rather than later when we actually receive the status formally. And the main benefit of that is donations made directly to NYC Mesh Inc., our new entity, we'll basically earn an extra 10% on those, because right now, under the previous structure, we are sending ISOC 10% of our donations. So that's the main benefit of doing it today, is just applying that 10% to things that directly benefit NYC Mesh. And so the proposal was to move our Stripe donations over this month. And I made outlined a quick plan here, which is to notify our existing recurring donors that this change is coming, because they should probably have consent that this is happening and that their donation will be moved over to this new entity. because the new entity is pending 501c3 status and is not officially approved, but that I'll talk about in a second what the risk and benefit there is. And then, so the next 30 days, I guess 20 days now, we'll be rolling out this notification saying that your donation is going to be transitioned over. And that's just being shot out through our Stripe invoices. And if you look at the funding channel on Slack, you can see the verbiage there. And then once June 6th rolls around, which is the date that I kind of proposed, we would basically keep our existing Stripe account, but just change the tax ID number and the bank account information, and everything will just kind of seamlessly shift over, hopefully. And we'd also need to update our donation form on our website to mention that those donations going through our web form are to a pending 501c3 pending organization. But basically at that point, those donations will be going through, I guess, one-time Stripe donations and recurring Stripe donations will be going through NYC Mesh Inc. All of the larger donations and non-cash donations would still probably need to go through ISOC, because those donors do often care about, they almost always care about the tax deductibility of their donation. And since NYC Mesh Inc. is a pending organization, that would need to be done through the older org. And throughout this process, we would also set up and maintain QuickBooks so that there's no need to go back and backfill data. It's just a fresh organization with a fresh set of books. And I've been working on that, which I'll give an update on in a second. And then once we have the formal IRS approval with our nonprofit status, we can then transfer our funds at ISOC to NYC Mesh Inc., update our website with that new status, and move all recurring donations, recurring expenses over as like a last step. So I'm going to stop there and let people ask questions, because I know there's a lot of information.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, go for it.
One question, is it only the donation, or also, although it does not happen right now, but when we do an install, they paid install through the same channel? So the Stripe does not make a difference, I guess. All that money goes to ISOC right now. Is it possible to have the donation going to the Mesh account, and I mean, or does it, maybe it doesn't matter, or everything goes?
Well, I guess how are those install fees being paid, if I'm understanding that right?
Same, through Stripe.
Then it all go through NYC, the new org.
Important to note that I'll add that for like the install, like equipment purchases, two things I think to consider on that is, one, I actually don't think that those are tax deductible contributions, because somebody is purchasing a good of value. NYC Mesh is really just acting as like a third party seller of this. But also number two, and most importantly, ISOC NY does not take any percentage of that. So those, they've been very gracious and really only kind of taking the 10% from what are actual real donations to NYC Mesh. And so those equipment fees right now, there's no loss to us. It doesn't matter whether it's maybe good for accounting to put it into NYC Mesh Inc., but with respect to kind of overall finances, it may not make a difference.
But Scott, what did you say? We should pay tax on that, on the install fee?
It's a question that I think we don't want to have to go down now, but we are selling a good, and it's something, it's a discussion that we need a legal opinion on. I'm not going to venture to try to answer it.
Okay. Yeah. So I understand it's not a discussion for now, but if that's the case, then we have to review the way to do it, because we don't want to pay tax.
I don't think we have to, Olivia, I don't think we have to worry about paying taxes on it. I just think the question is whether it is a tax deductible contribution for an individual or not. Whereas their $20 a month may be a tax deductible donation, that like initial $110 across the board may not be. I don't think that.
I would
NYC Mesh has to pay taxes, you know.
I would argue that the $20 donation is tax deductible, but the rest is a reimbursement of. I mean, we're not buying or selling anything. They are buying, but we buy for them.
Right. No, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I think you're right. I think we're on the same page with that.
And thinking about it from like a very basic perspective, there'd be no profit to NYC Mesh Inc. in either scenario. So I don't think there's a tax issue on our end to think about there.
We lose money on every install.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think we
can write it off, Akash. If you can figure out a way to write that off, you know.
Where we get the government to pay us money instead.
So I have a question. I think you mentioned it earlier, and it's kind of obvious, but if you know, as a pending organization, as you mentioned, we can you know, go back with the taxes, and so people's donations to it will be 501c3. They can deduct it on their taxes up to 1.5 years back.
Yeah.
But the challenge is, what happens if we don't get 501c3 status, meaning it takes longer? And the reason I ask is, you know, I've been part of nonprofits prior to NYC Mesh, and we had the same thing. We applied for 501c3 status, but we chose at that time not to go ahead and accept donations on the new org because we didn't want to have the opportunity for maybe IRS wants to do a review, or it takes longer, or they ask for more paperwork, or they want to change. And then it takes, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 months of back and forth with them to make it happen. So how, you know, what risks and what do you think the chances are, or should we wait 6 months and then accept donations in order to kind of have an extra buffer of space there?
Yeah, so that's something that was talked about a lot on Slack, and I think that's one of the biggest risks here. Right? It's obvious we don't receive the status, or it comes in late. I think that the former scenario where we don't receive the status is very, very low likelihood, but it could certainly take a long time to process.
Yeah.
And the size of donations going through Stripe right now is individually very small. And in talking with, I think, Brian and a few others, it didn't seem like any of those recurring donors have ever asked for any additional information on NYC Mesh so they can take an individual deduction on their taxes. So it seems like they are all just not itemizing the NYC Mesh donation on their end. So it doesn't matter from their perspective.
Well, tell me if I'm incorrect here, but, and I'm not a tax lawyer, but I don't think that, you know, I don't think it's a good assumption on our part to say that because they haven't asked for us to write them a donation letter, that they aren't taking the tax deduction. Because I don't think that, and again, we're not tax lawyers here, but I don't think that you are required to firstly have a paper from an organization in order to claim it. You can list the name of the organization, their EIN, and you can just do it. So yeah. I'm not sure that we can, I don't think it's a good assumption to say that we don't think that those people are taking that deduction. I think we should assume everyone is, because we've told them as a donation. And so, you know, to be fair to that, we can do it with a new org, as you said, but I think it would be quite a mess if some people gave donations, let's say 500 different people gave donations, and then we slipped over the timeline, and now we have to somehow tell 500 different donors that they have to redo their taxes or something because something was wrong 2 years ago, right? And so if it's like a PTO organization or something, and you tell the 5 parents that their that they have to do their taxes differently because the PTO didn't get IRS 501c3, cool, right? But it seems like it's a little bit bigger, and to the end point, we should assume that they are taking the deduction, right?
Well, I guess I have a question for everybody here then, and including you, Zach. Would they have had to ask NYC Mesh for our EIN to manually itemize it in their taxes?
So our EIN, meaning ISOC's EIN, is quite well known. It's on a bunch of websites. They don't really have to ask anything for it. We give it to people who ask for it anyway. So people do get that as kind of a public knowledge number. Now, I'm not even sure they require the EIN. Like donations I've given to, the church or whatever, I don't know their EIN. I just listed it, because I did. And if there's an audit, they can find very easily that I did do it, right? Again, we're not tax lawyers, but I think regardless of who we've told or given the letter to, I think we should assume that people can and will do tax deductions on the last many years now since we started.
And I guess an additional question I have, which I'm not sure the answer to, is something you were alluding to. What happens if the application takes more than X amount of months? Like, do they need to redo their taxes, or like, what happens there? I don't know.
I don't know, but I don't think it's that we pay a fine. Like, no, I don't think we end up paying the taxes. I think they end up donating to a thing that's not nonprofit. And so I don't know what the biggest problem is for them. Maybe nothing, right? But I think if they were audited, then it would be a problem. And so bigger donors, like you mentioned, are going to want to have some assurance that we really are 501c3. Yeah. They usually ask for the letter that the IRS gave us that shows that it really is 501c3. The smaller ones, I bet nothing happens. The bigger ones, I don't know, but it's not really kosher, So anyway, I'm for the new org. I'm for the IRS submission. I'm for people donating early. I just want us to maybe think about what, is it too big of a risk? And maybe we should wait some time so that we have a buffer, because we want to be fair to our members.
Right. And here's two things then to add on to that. For those recurring donations that already exist, we are notifying them. What might be premature, we'll see, but we are notifying them that this change is happening and that they are will be donating to a pending organization. So in my opinion, that covers the existing base. And if anybody has questions on that, we can somehow have them directed to ISOC still. And for future donations via the web form, there would be a notification on the page where you're on, whatever the URL is, that this donation is being made to a pending organization, and that we can have their donation made to ISOC if they do care about the deductibility.
Yeah. Sure, I hear what you're saying, and again, please don't think that my reticence towards this is against the organization or anything, but doing that technically meets the requirements, right? Because we've told them, but it might not be very good because now they don't have a way out apart from having to contact somebody and then do something else like mail a check-in, or it complicates it. It means that we all have to do a lot of manual labor and switch people over. Some people are here, some are there. It would be much cleaner and easier to switch everyone at once when we know that it's going to work.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to think about the labor that we have to do as well.
One thing I'm thinking of is that the average annual donation per person is probably under $500 a year. So whether or not it's going to be a make or break, if they're making meeting the minimum for a donation for their taxes. But if we have like a threshold, like if you're going to donate over this amount of money to do it through ISOC for now, maybe like $500 or $1,000, where it would actually start to make
Is there a minimum for what you can contribute to a nonprofit and remove from your taxes? I know there's standard deduction, but I don't think that there's like a minimum. No.
It's like it doesn't make it worth it to if you're either taking the standard deduction or itemizing all your things. So unless you have like, I don't know, a bunch of kids or like some weird tax situation. I mean, okay, kids are not a weird tax situation, sorry, but like, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point. I'm not sure that, again, we're not tax lawyers, so like we can't really say, oh, for most people they're going to take the standard deduction versus the alternate standard deduction versus or the standard deduction, sorry, as opposed to an itemized deduction. But that's not up to us, right? And so the idea is more like we should be straightforward about it and say, if we say we're 501c3 and it turns out that we're not later, and they don't actually have to redo their taxes because TurboTax actually didn't submit that one page that they thought they submitted, then they're not in trouble. But it's confusing because they might be or they might not be. Just like if we have some of them on ISOC and some of them on us, some of them might be tax deductible, some of them might not be, and some of them might be until later and they might actually be. So
it might be like, I totally agree that it could be bad PR, but have we done like the numbers on what the benefit of this kind of like soft launch of 501c3 status? Like the big benefits, like we get back 10%.
Yeah.
But if we're getting back 10% of a couple really small donations, I feel like that might not be worth the cost of the bad PR if we had to do this weird thing where we're like, hey, you need to redo your taxes to like 5 people, which is still kind of.
I think, guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it would be close to $10,000 if you look at the last 12 months of activity on Stripe.
Yes, but you also said it's gonna. I mean, if it's quick and we do get the 5013, then it's done and we switch over and we don't lose much.
Yeah.
And if it takes a long time,
I think it's safe to assume
if it takes a long time
and
and we don't get it soon enough, then we're in trouble because we switch them too fast.
So I guess a big question that I don't think any of us have the answer to is what happens if it takes too long? And maybe we can find someone to talk to about that. Scott, do you know anybody?
I mean, I can loop folks into conversation with our attorney who's working on this. We're about to submit the paperwork for it. I think COVID has delayed a lot that the IRS is working on, I understand, because they're so technologically backwards. I don't think I think a reasonable estimate for the time from filing, which should be within the next 5 or 6 days, to getting a determination letter from the IRS, assuming that there's no kind of issues and follow-up that Zach was kind of describing. I think it's easy that we're looking at like a 6 month, if you want to ballpark very vaguely, 6 months. I think we're collecting about $5,000 every month in small $20 a month related contributions. 10% of that is $500. I think the universe that we're talking about here is somewhere on the order of $3,000, $4,000 in kind of payments to ISOC NY. And to put it into kind of realistic terms, that's 6 to 8 months.
That is an install or two each month that we could be.
Yeah, so I think I'm not against submitting. I think we should submit, and then we should do so as soon as possible. The question is not whether we should submit, it's whether or not we should start switching people over forcefully, for lack of a better word, early or not. And the implication being that there might be a problem. It's an unknown. We don't know what the problem is if it takes longer. The last 501c3 I was part of, it wasn't 6 months, it was 1 year and 2 months. So we were 3 months away from the end of the deadline. Maybe it's different. Maybe it's different in each state or how you do it or anything like that. And so like, it's cool. Maybe it's totally not a problem, but we should at least think about what happens if there is a problem. So if we can find out, if it's not a big deal, let's do it. If it is, we might want to consider what to do. Yeah. Which might be just delay, right? It might just be delay, not submission, but switching people over so that there's a buffer, right? Maybe, you know.
Yeah, I'm agree with that. Everybody else think that's good homework for us?
Sorry, were you? Sorry, I was a little distracted. Are we moving on, or?
I think I think the decision on this, if I'm hearing things right, we should probably check with someone who's professional first on what happens if this process stretches out. And if it's a pain in the butt, then we should wait until we actually have the status.
So maybe we should remove or change the text in the receipt.
Yes, that'll be an action item for today.
Because I'm still thinking that filing, we already said we're going to file. That's not the issue. But if it goes fast, then we don't lose that much. And if it drags too long, we need to know what can be the problem.
Yes. And I'm also unsure about, Zach, you probably know more about this than I do. Is that deadline a filing deadline, or is it a deadline of when you actually are granted the status?
You mean the 1.5 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's from filing.
Okay.
Oh no, sorry. I think it's from when you're granted the status. Yeah, so it's up to 1.5 years before. So if it takes you 3 years to get status, it's not the first 1.5 years; it's the last 1.5 years.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yeah, it does. It does. All right. Yeah, I'll do some digging on that after this. And the other item doesn't really take any slides is we are finally setting up QuickBooks, which is great. I know everybody has been involved in that, and once you get QuickBooks set up, right, it's pretty simple to use, but someone does need to kind of log in there once in a while and tag things properly if there are exceptions. Most things can be automated, but sometimes things just need some manual effort. So if anybody wants to help out with that, let me know.
So what is going to go into QuickBook?
Ultimately, I haven't written this down yet, but ultimately, Stripe will automatically feed into QuickBooks. Our bank account will feed into QuickBooks, and ideally, the equipment that we own would be inventoried on QuickBooks to an extent for the purposes of accounting and just having an asset base, because those things are physical things that NYC Mesh Inc. owns and could sell theoretically. So there should be a value attributed to that. And the benefit of doing that is it kind of, again, better positions us to apply for grants, and that it shows the size of our organization from an economic perspective.
So when someone order equipment, like Jason, Zach, or Brian so far, it goes in. They pay with the organization credit card. Then it will show up automatically in QuickBook.
Hopefully, eventually, yeah, that's the goal. If you have this temporary inventory, and then once you actually deploy it at a node, it's no longer really our inventory or our equipment. It's the users. So then it'd be wiped off our books at that point.
So someone will have to go to QuickBooks saying it now it's being.
Probably something like that, or something automated that's tied into one of our existing systems. I have yet to plan that out in detail.
Okay.
but I think that's the right way to do it at a high level. If anybody has any questions on that, I'm on Slack, and I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah, I might hop on that because I just finished a semester of financial accounting, so it'll probably be good to have some application
there you go.
to it.
I'll just note that currently all of NYC Mesh's financial history and documents are recorded in a single Google Doc spreadsheet, just as context.
Yeah.
Which is horrific if you've ever applied for a grant and have to report any sort of figures or past spending or anything like that. But it's also in the same way that we're trying to transfer over our kind of master Google Doc of users to a more accessible database. I think this kind of effort very much parallels that. So thanks so much for working on this.
And was that Google Doc you referenced, was that what Leslie worked on?
No, that Google Doc is maintained by ISOC NY. That's, our 10% of that fee is paying them to maintain a Google Doc of our finances and, report and do any kind of reporting that may be necessary related to that. But since they're kind of the ultimate controllers of the bank account, at the end of the day, they're, ultimately responsible for maintaining that. But as we come into our own, it'd be nice to take on the responsibility of doing that in the most kind of streamlined way we can.
Okay, should we move on and talk about some of our updates? Rob and Scott, we've been doing a lot of projects with NYCHA and a lot of bigger projects lately, and they're gonna update everyone, including myself, who's kind of been buried for the last few weeks.
Hey, so I can jump right in. For those who don't know, we are planning an expansion, or hoping to expand into the Bronx. And the form that it's taking is through a collaboration with a couple of organizations, Block Power and an organization called Metro IAF, who has a bunch of relationships with tenant organizations and churches in the area. And the idea is to use some grant money from a couple of different grants to fund a supernode in a housing development, and then expand that to several housing developments. And it's moving. There are several pieces that are a little hard to keep track of. But I know there's been a part of this that Zach has been working on, getting the sort of backbone connectivity, and we may do some site surveys coming up in these buildings. The idea is to provide some community Wi-Fi in the NYCHA developments, and then have antennas on the roof for nearby buildings. And we're hoping that the grants give us money to also do some internals of some of the buildings. That's a little bit up in the air, just because we don't know exactly how much we'll be getting with the grants. But we do have at least one donor who's given some money. And so right now, I think the next big deadline that I'm working on is on Sunday. There's another grant due to be submitted for ISOC, actually. And so we're in the process of putting that together. Maybe I'll do an @channel about, I think Connect NYC is the sort of Slack channel where we're working on different parts of this, and putting that grant together. I have just one, let me just do one screen share. I don't have a whole presentation here,
So just Rob, can I
Yeah.
ask one? So that's South Bronx.
Yes, that's correct.
So this is, and there are a few NYCHA building. That's how it's connected to NYCHA.
There are a few complexes that in this area, in the South Bronx and East Harlem, there are basically very few tall buildings that are not NYCHA. And so we, by building some relationships with these buildings, we're trying to be on the roofs of those buildings as sort of a core presence in the area.
But that's the relation that Metro IF and Block Power has.
Yes, that's correct.
So
yeah,
would it make sense? Would it make sense to have a? I'm asking this for myself selfishly. There's so many projects, and it starts to be really confusing.
Yeah.
And the Connect NYC, I think it's something different. So can we have a South Bronx, and it's a very defined project?
We could. You're proposing like a Slack channel, or by project, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that would work well. I have been scrambling to get some of the grants, but I think it's very easy to lose track of this. And so a better format for the Slack especially would probably be a good idea here.
Because Vernon project, which is separate, is also an NYCHA building.
That's correct.
But it's nothing to do with Block Power and Metro IF.
Yes, there was another thing that I would describe as unrelated. That there's Vernon. There's also Spectrum Strikers that we've been talking to. I'm not sure that will turn into anything, but it's not really this project is not particularly related to that.
The Spectrum Strikers is more a working group that can work on any of those projects.
Yeah, and it's not clear yet either how we would. We're kind of working out if we were to work with them, how would we pay them?
Yeah.
How any of that, but they would, for us, they would sort of act as an electrical contractor would. And so we also have other electrical contractors that we work with. So it's not, there's no dependency there. Yeah, I'm into a Slack channel that has all this information. Maybe once I'm in the middle of working on this grant, maybe I'll.
We need like a flowchart or an infographic on how all these things are connected and what grants are going to what.
Yeah, I think it will help if anything actually happens. It will help sort out what's going on. Because right now there's been a lot of things proposed, and I think it's, we'll do probably late this week, early next week, we'll do some walkthrough, but until we're ordering equipment and things like that, until we see the money, it's feels nebulous.
Yeah, my impression about based on that thread between with you and Leslie and myself was that you guys are just kind of writing all the grants or just positioning them all for the South Bronx, because like you might get one of them, and if you get all of them, like you can, there's enough projects to redistribute that money towards, but which I think is, if I'm. Does anyone else have anything else to add or any questions? Does anyone else have anything they'd like to chat about. We're going to do a breakout room for newcomers, and then we can also continue some other conversations here. One thing I was going to mention, and this is more just like a topic for discussion, is there has been some talk about restarting installs relatively soon and what that is going to look like and how that transition is going to happen. So I don't know if anyone has anything to contribute, or if we want to kind of do a specific breakout room for that, or just continue the conversation on Slack. Okay, I'll take that silence. There's nothing else. But all right, so if you're new, we have like a introduction presentation just to tell you who we are. Definitely sometimes these org meetings at the beginning, it's easy to get thrown into the weeds early on, but it kind of gives you an idea of what we're working on and what the landscape is like and what you might be in for. So if you're new, you could, if you could just like comment on the chat if you'd be interested in going to the breakout room. Donuts has a presentation and we'll be able to answer questions. And then I can send you guys.
All right, thanks, Jolie. For reopening the install calendar, I can give a brief update on that.